My son kicked me out at Christmas because I was too old. But he'll regret it. I didn't plan it to be theatrical. That was his wife's thing. The glittered garlands, the 8-foot spruce with a train track running circles under it, the staged photos that made the house look like a magazine. I liked the paper angel my grandson made in kindergarten with its crooked halo. It kept sliding off the top, drifting down like a small, soft failure. I put it back on every time. She kept taking it off because it didn't match the scheme. I'm 68, a widower. The house isn't mine. It belongs to my son, Daniel. Technically. We'll get to that. After my wife died, I had the old cabin taken down and sold off what we could. I kept the little lot, just a concrete slab and 4 pines, and moved into a spare room over Daniel's garage to be near my grandson Theo, and to help with school pickups when the app they used for nannies kept canceling. My rent was groceries and mowing the lawn. I made soup on Sundays. I repaired door hinges and tuned the snowblower. I kept my tools clean and labeled, because every time Daniel borrowed a wrench, it reappeared sticky, like it had been through a jar of jelly. Daniel calls himself a founder. He runs a software firm that's really 3 people, a leased logo wall, and a sliding deck of jargon. He has a gift for performance. I try not to be unkind. He was always the child who stood at the edge of the diving board talking himself up to the jump. His wife Jenna liked that about him, the patter, the confidence. She has an eye for angles and ring lights. They are, in their way, perfectly matched. 2 days before Christmas, he brought me an envelope on heavy paper. "Just a formality," he said, the way people on TV say, "You're going to feel a pinch." The document was a quitclaim deed for the little patch of land where the cabin had been. The buyer's name was a shell company I recognized from Jenna's logo portfolio. I told him I didn't want to sign. He laughed like I was being quaint about emojis. "It's dead equity, Dad," he said. "We're going to turn it into something the family can enjoy." "What kind of something?" "A content studio?" Jenna chimed in from the island, where she was layering cookies into an artful pyramid. "Rustic vibe, evergreen backdrop, your legacy, our lens." I said no again, and the room cooled several degrees. He put the envelope on my placemat anyway, carefully, so the corners lined up. That night in my room, I took out the 3 checks I'd written him over the last 5 years. He'd needed help. The payroll tax blip, the server meltdown, the crash and burn of a marketing push that turned into a refund hurricane. I kept the stubs. I kept everything. Each check had a 1-page promissory note he'd signed without quite reading. Interest at 4%, payable upon demand, collateralized by his business assets and, if necessary, the house. I hadn't written it to trap him. I'd written it because I wanted him to read what he was doing, and my signature alone never made him pause. Christmas morning was all cinnamon and phones. Jenna filmed Theo running down the stairs, then filmed herself filming him. Daniel narrated the unwrapping of each gift, as if the audience needed to be told what paper was. I sat in the corner and tried to keep the angel from sliding. When the paper was adrift you could wade through, I went to the kitchen to wash my mug. I never left dishes in their sink. Their sink was a stage, and a stray spoon could ruin a shot. Daniel followed me with that envelope. No bow this time. "Don't make it tense," he said lightly. "Just sign and this is over. I'm not signing something I don't understand. And I don't like the way you're pressing me." Jenna's nail tips tapped the counter. "We have a closing scheduled. Investors are ready. You're putting us in a bind." "I'm putting you in a bind by not giving you something you want for free," I said. "That's a funny definition." Daniel stared at me like I'd changed languages. His face took on the granite calm he used when posing for headshots. "Dad," he said, "we need the room. We're converting the garage. We can't keep doing this with you underfoot." It sounded rehearsed because it was. The next words were the same ones he'd used at 16 when he wanted to get rid of curfews. "This isn't personal. They had packed my things. My winter coat was laid on the staircase like a body. My toolbox was zipped and waiting at the door. Jenna held Theo on her hip in a way that made it look like a hug and felt like a shackle. As I walked past, Theo reached for me and she pivoted so his hand closed on air. I stood on the porch with my duffel in the late morning sunlight on the unshoveled walk I usually kept clear. The plastic snowman grinned beside me. Inside, the house sang with a playlist about togetherness. "Where should I go?" I asked. Daniel looked toward the street. "You're resourceful," he said. Then the door closed, gently, to protect the paint. I keep a small list of motels that smell less like old smoke than others. I took a room by the highway. The bedspread was geometric in a way that tried to be cheerful and only managed aggressive. I put my toolbox under the bed and my coat in the closet and sat on the edge of the mattress until my breathing slowed. Then I took out my folder, the checks and the notes, and I made a second list. People are always surprised that the patient ones see farther. I was a machinist for 38 years. You learn that everything has a tolerance and a weakness. You learn to feel a burr with your finger long before the machine screams. When my wife got sick, I learned how to read the small print on prescription labels and the smaller print on insurance policy riders. And when Daniel decided to build a company out of ambition and adjectives, I learned how to review operating agreements. The friend he thought was just a notary is an attorney named Elena, who drinks black tea and doesn't mind explaining things twice. The trick, she told me once, is to ask what happens if everyone behaves badly. At noon, I called Elena. I didn't cry, though I would have forgiven myself if I had. I laid it out, the investors, the quitclaim, the sudden room they needed, the promissory notes, their terms, my worry for Theo. She told me to text her photos of the notes. I had neat flat scans stored already. Old men can learn to be precise with phones. She said, "All right," in a tone that meant gears were catching. Do you recall the addendum I suggested for the last note? The one he didn't read? The one he initialed on every page without reading, yes. She read it back to me. Numbered paragraph 6. In the event of eviction or attempted eviction of the lender from borrower's residence absent cause recognized by law, all sums shall become immediately due and payable. Failure to cure within 5 business days permits filing of a confession of judgment. She'd insisted on the language the day Daniel had slid the signed pages under my soup spoon to get them off the island before Jenna noticed. He had been promoting a product launch that imploded 3 weeks later. He didn't come to Sunday soup, and when he did, he left at halftime to make a call. I put the signed addendum behind the checks and later printed his email thanking me for the lifeline. People discard the small cords they can't see. That's how they hang themselves. "Do you have somewhere to go for a few nights?" Elena asked. "This will be unpleasantly fast." "I'm in a motel." "Keep receipts," she said, "and don't go back to the house." "I'll file for a temporary protection order. The judge on duty on Monday is no nonsense. I like our chances. The notes give us leverage. We'll need a locksmith and a witness. The sheriff's department can arrange a civil standby. But he's my son." "Yes," she said, "and he chose to behave like a landlord who thinks feelings are leases. You're fortunate you documented the debt. Most people don't." I slept badly. At 2 a.m, the heater hummed and popped to life like it was chewing on nails. My phone buzzed. A photo lit the screen. Theo in front of the tree, lower lip out. "He misses you," came the message from an unknown number that turned out to be the nanny's. She sent a second photo of the table where I set soup on Sundays, now bare except for arranged cookies and a candle with a wick too short to catch. On Monday at 9, I sat across from Elena in a courthouse hallway that smelled of old plaster and coffee. She wore a navy suit the color of courage. We had prepared a simple binder, copies of the notes, screenshots of messages where Daniel called them loans, bank records of the transfers, and a short affidavit that described the eviction exactly as it happened. "Keep it clean," she'd told me. No editorializing. The judge listened. I could see how many of these stories she'd heard and how tired they made her. When Elena mentioned the addendum, the judge's eyebrows lifted a millimeter. You wrote this yourself? Elena did, I said. The judge signed the order granting me the right to re-enter the residence and prohibiting Daniel from removing me without further order of court. She took a longer minute with the confession of judgment clause, then noted on the record that it could be filed and entered if Daniel failed to cure within 5 business days. Her signature was lined and elegant. I had the childish urge to trace it. You can go to the house with a locksmith, the judge said. The deputy will meet you. Don't escalate. I don't want to escalate, I said. Back at the motel, I wrote a letter to Daniel. I wrote it on paper because paper moves slower and maybe it would slow him. I told him exactly what I had done and exactly what I would do next. I said I loved him. I said I would not bankroll him without boundaries. I said that if he met with me to discuss a payment plan and proof of therapy, as Elena put it, he controls his outbursts like he controls a budget. I would consider pausing any filing. I told him I'd be at the house Wednesday morning with the deputy. Please be there, I wrote, for Theo's sake and for yours. He didn't respond. The locksmith's van met us at the curb the way a rescue boat comes to a sandbar, suspiciously cheerful. The deputy was a woman with a quiet voice and boots that knew snow. We walked up the front path through a drift that had swallowed the walkway like a sugar spill. The snowman leaned, grinning, toward the shrubs. The house looked like a catalog photo until you noticed the small wrongnesses. Dead bulbs in the eaves, a crooked strand, a cracked ribbon on the wreath. The deputy knocked. Sheriff's Department, she said. We're here on a civil order. Anyone home? No answer. The locksmith looked at me. I nodded. He worked. You'd be amazed how quick a house surrenders when the right tools are applied with respect. Inside, the heat was set low. The air had the must of a showplace after the audience has left, a plate with 2 cookies hardened on the island. Theo's blue sock lay under a stool like a tired fish. Elena walked through carefully, phone camera low, narrating the date and time and rooms. Living room cleared of valuables, she said in a neutral tone. Master bedroom closet empty of men's clothing. No personal computers on premises. The nursery had a tent in it, a gauze dome over a padded mat with a starfield pattern, as if sleep were a brand. On the kitchen counter, the envelope with the quitclaim lay open, my name already printed below the signature line, waiting for my hand to complete the act. I put it in my binder, slow enough that Elena could capture the motion. She gave a little satisfied nod. Chain of custody, she whispered. There was a knock at the door while we were turning the heat up. Daniel walked in without waiting, in a coat with a fur-trimmed hood that made him look like a boy under a costume. Jenna followed, her makeup perfect despite the hour, her mouth set. Theo was with them, sleepy-eyed. He held the paper angel like a talisman. What is this? Daniel asked, taking in the deputy, the locksmith, Elena's binder. You can't just... You kicked me out, I said. The court says I can be here. I asked you to give us space, he said. You're always dramatizing. Elena handed him a copy of the order and a summary of the note terms. He scanned the pages. I watched the part where he didn't read again flicker across his face as a memory. He swallowed hard when he read the line about all sums due. Immediate? That's not... Dad, that's not fair. Fair would have been asking me to leave at a reasonable time, giving me notice, not using Theo like a shield, I said. My voice shook and I hated that it gave away the cost. I told you I won't be your wallet without your respect. The judge has given us a way to make a plan if you'll stop pretending this is a misunderstanding. Jenna stepped forward, phone in her hand already, red light blinking. This is elder abuse, she said with the wrong subject. Everyone will see what you're doing. "Turn the camera off in my house," I said. "Your house?" Daniel's laugh had an edge. "That's rich." Elena's look was a small alarm bell. "Daniel," she said, "may we speak privately about the terms?" "We can discuss a stipulation. If you keep this civil, your son doesn't have to watch deputies move furniture." Theo slipped his hand into mine. His fingers were cold. "Grandpa," he whispered, "can I show you my train?" "Of course," I said, and the deputy, to her credit, moved so the camera couldn't catch Theo's face while we stepped to the living room. The track circled faithfully. The angel was missing from the tree. Theo fished it out from behind a cushion, where it had fallen or been stowed, and handed it to me. I climbed the small ladder Jenna used to position ornaments and pinned the paper halo back to the top with a paperclip from my pocket. "Now it's right," he said. "Now it's ours," I corrected softly. My terms were simple. Daniel would sign a repayment plan secured by a second lien on the house. He'd cancel the closing with the shell company and any applications for variance on the cabin lot. He would apologize in writing for the eviction and agree to therapy. He would not interfere with my relationship with Theo. If he did, I would file the confession of judgment and begin foreclosure. "Foreclosure," he said, like tasting a sour candy. "On your own son." "On a debtor who has refused to act in good faith," Elena said. "She does not add sugar to tea." "You can't," Jenna started. "You told me to be strategic," Daniel snapped at her, and the way he said it told me what their car ride had been like. "You said he'd fold." "I said he'd be reasonable," she said, ice returning. "I didn't think he'd lawyer up." "Do you agree to the plan?" Elena asked him. He stared at the pages like the numbers would blink and change if he willed them hard enough. "I need time." "You have 5 days," Elena said. "That's what the addendum says." "It's generous." "What if I can't?" "Then the confession of judgment is filed and entered," she replied. "The clerk is prepared to do it." "This is the part where you do the right thing," Daniel Jenna paced. "We'll tell everyone," she said. "You're a monster." "I'm a man who won't be kicked out of his home at Christmas," I said. "Call me whatever makes you feel better." He signed. His pen trembled a little. He didn't look at me, the way drivers don't look at the ditch they almost slid into. If they don't see it, they can pretend it wasn't close. For 4 days, the house worked its way back into order like a muscle thawing. I made soup on Sunday, a day late and with less salt because Daniel's blood pressure was up. Theo and I fixed the snowblower. I walked him to the corner where the bus comes, and we stomped a rhythm into the crusted snow. Daniel stayed mostly upstairs on calls, his voice pitched high on persuasion. He came down once to get coffee and froze like a deer when he saw me in the kitchen, as if I'd popped into existence instead of being there, humming, wiping the same clean spot on the counter for the 3rd time. He opened his mouth like he might say something ordinary and closed it with a click. On the 5th day, a Saturday, he didn't come home. Sunday morning, the doorbell rang, and Jenna stood on the porch with a suitcase and the paper angel in her hand. Her eyes were red. She looked less composed, or rather composed in a way that looked like it hurt. "We're taking a break," she said flatly. "He's staying at his co-founder's." "Come in," I said. "I'm packing my things," she said. "You're welcome to," I replied. "Theo can stay with me until—" "He's with my mother," she said quickly. She swallowed. "I'm not a villain." "I didn't say you were," I said. "I said Theo can stay with me if you need to work." "He knows the house." She looked past me at the living room. The ladder still stood under the tree. "He made that angel with you, didn't he?" she asked. "He did," I said. "He didn't like that it kept falling, but he liked that we kept fixing it." She put the angel carefully in my hand. "Keep it then," she said. "It'll just get bent in my car." At noon, a black SUV pulled up and a man in a black coat stepped out with a briefcase. I recognized the type. Lender. He introduced himself to Elena, who had arrived without being asked because she has a map for these kinds of days. He wanted to discuss the second lien and the plan. He wanted to discuss the valuation of the house, the sequence of payments, the default provisions. "He hasn't paid you?" Elena asked him. "Not yet," the man said, glancing at me with professional pity. "We gave him a courtesy extension. He used it on a campaign boost. It tanked." "How much is he in arrears?" I asked. He named a number that made even Elena's eyebrows notch up. "We'll be posting on Tuesday," he added. "I thought I'd give you the courtesy of notice, given your position." On Tuesday morning, the sheriff's civil unit came again with blue tape and paper with boxes to tick. They were careful with the wreath. The plastic snowman beamed without understanding. Across the street, a neighbor stood behind his storm door and pretended to look at a thermostat. Daniel pulled up halfway through, idling at the curb like he could speed away from the scene or back into it. He walked to the front step with the gait of someone who's been wearing confidence like a borrowed coat too long. He stared at the paper. "Dad," he said, shredded, "don't do this." "I didn't tape that notice," I said. "Your bank did." "I asked you to make a plan." "You didn't." "I tried," he said, and he meant it in the way of men who have tried everything except stopping. "I called everyone. I pivoted." "You pivoted so much you drilled a hole in the floor," I said. "Look at me." He did. He looked like he was 8 and about to confess to a broken window. Something in my chest, which had been hard stone all week, went soft. "I can buy the note," I said. Elena made a small sound of deliberation. The lender had floated the idea with her in a low voice when he'd realized how clean my paper was and how likely the foreclosure process was to become dramatic. "At a discount," I added, "because I'm not a fool. If I do, you'll make the payments to me instead of the bank. You'll do it on time, and you'll go to therapy, and you'll stop treating everyone like extras in your movie." He blinked. Why?" "Because I want my grandson in a house where the heat is set to 70 and the pipes don't freeze because no one's watching the thermostat," I said. "Because I want you to learn the difference between a pitch and a promise. Because I want to believe you can still be the boy who climbed back up and jumped after he was scared." His shoulders collapsed over something like relief and humiliation. It didn't look good on him. Maybe that was a start. "I can do that," he whispered. "I can." "You can," I said, "but you have to." Elena negotiated the purchase like she was buying a whole car lot. The lender liked my paper, liked Elena's meticulousness, liked not having to send his people to change locks in a snowstorm. We closed the next day in a conference room with a table heavy enough to crush toes if it fell. I paid less than I thought I would. I didn't crow. I took the stack of documents and held them like they were newborns, fragile, crying, full of need. Back at the house, I taped my own notice to the inside of the cabinet where we keep the coffee. A calendar of payments, dates marked in thick pen. "We'll go month by month," I told Daniel. "You'll show me the receipts. If you're late, there are consequences. If you're on time, there is praise. That's fatherhood. The surprise is it still applies when your child is grown." He nodded. He was learning to listen to words without preparing a reply. It made his face gentler. I moved back into the garage room. I rehung the pegboard where my tools belong. On Sundays, I made soup. On Mondays, I learned which days Jenna brought Theo and which days he stayed with her mother. Jenna and I reached a truce that felt like a path over ice. She brought me a jar of her mother's borscht one day, and I returned it washed with a note. "Good tang. Could use more dill." She wrote back, "You're not wrong." And a small, conspiratorial piece of the world shifted. In February, Daniel went to therapy twice a week. In March, he sold a piece of equipment he didn't need and paid 3 months ahead. He sent me photos from the waiting room. A cheap plant, a poster about breathing. The texts were brief, went, hard, going again, and glowed more real than all the adjectives he'd used to launch his failed products. In April, he brought me a letter, not an email, not a post, where he apologized without performing and asked if I would come watch Theo at his t-ball practice. I said yes. We sat on the aluminum bleachers and shouted when Theo hit a ball so gently it rolled back to him like a dog. Daniel cried then, quick and quiet behind his sunglasses. The wind took the sound. I pretended not to see. Later, when we were leaving, he took my arm at the curb so I wouldn't slip. He hadn't done that before. When Christmas came around again, there was no inflatable snowman. There was a paper angel with a halo that did not fall because I had fashioned a new clip from a twist tie and a washer. The tree was shorter. The ladder was gone. The house looked less like a catalog and more like a place where people lived and forgot their mugs on coasters and left their slippers askew. Jenna came for dinner and brought rolls she admitted were store-bought. We didn't stage anything. Theo played the train and it derailed twice and we all laughed. Daniel handed me a small flat box. Inside was a key fob. Nothing symbolic, just practical. An extra for the new garage door opener. It was wrong what I did, he said, not just to me but to the room in a way that blessed it. I thought I was building something big enough to stand on and I was sawing the legs off. I'm sorry, Dad. I know, I said. I accept. He nodded. He looked older. That was not a punishment. That was a fact. Only the young believe their faces are promises no one will ever collect. And because life is not symmetrical and doesn't owe you neatness, in January he was late. It was a small late, a day, then two, and I felt the heat rise in my chest the way it did when the machine screamed in the shop after a burr met a wheel. I called him. I said, I need you to treat due dates like oxygen. He said yes, and sent proof from his phone within the hour. We did not make it a drama. We did not post it with captions. We lived it. The paper angel now goes into a shoebox on January 2nd with my see-through tape and a folded piece of paper that says in Theo's handwriting, "Don't lose." Every year we take it out and it falls once, because it's a piece of paper and the world moves. And we fix it, because that's what you do when something light and hopeful won't stay where you put it. I don't tell the story of the Christmas I was kicked out to hurt my son or to make myself heroic. I tell it so people understand that mercy is not the absence of boundaries. Mercy is a straight line you hold out so someone with a talent for circles can grab on. Mercy is also a ledger balanced with a steady hand. I learned that in a shop where metal sings when you do it right, and I learned it again, late, in a kitchen where the coffee cabinet has a calendar taped inside. When I pass the front porch now, the door opens before I knock. Not because we're waiting to film it, because we've started listening for each other in a house that, legally, practically, quietly, belongs to us both. On the mantel, between two photos of Theo with a gap-toothed grin, sits the thick envelope with the paid-in-full receipts. It doesn't match the scheme no one cares. It matches the truth. And the truth is that a man can be put out in the cold on a holy day and still choose to bring the heat back with him. And the son who opened the door to push him out can learn to open it to let him in.
This is my grandfather's story. He lived it, I just share it. Subscribe for more true stories worth remembering.